Hello everybody, good afternoon. Welcome back to my channel, Straight Out of Context. I am Barbara Ann. I'm going to dive right into a video that I have been working on for well over a year now. And this is in relation to a true crime story that has to do with my family. And it is very close and personal to me, to my heart, to my mother. And this video may extend to be a couple videos long. However, I'm going to set the stage for what this is all about, the time, the place. Now, the time was March 13th, 1926 in Detroit, Michigan. That is Wayne County. And some of the facts that I wanted to give you guys is so that way people are transported back to that time to understand what it was like 99 years ago in Detroit, Michigan. And the mayor of Detroit at that time was John W. Smith. The governor of Michigan was Alex J. Grossbeck. And if you are from Clinton Township, Sterling Heights, the Metro Detroit area, Detroit, downriver, any of the areas, you will be familiar with a street called Grossbeck. And now you know, because the governor of Michigan in 1926 was Alex J. Grossbeck. Now, in 1920, the population of Detroit was 3,668,412. It was the seventh most populous state out of all states. Now, in 1930, 10 years after that, it increased 32% to over 4,842,325. We had sports. We had sports in 1926. Yes, we did. Baseball. Detroit had the Tigers, which is still the Tigers today. And we had football. Now, this is where things get very interesting and very different, because if you are a U of M or Michigan State fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Go Blue. Football. We had in 1926 the Panthers. We had the Michigan Wolverines. We had Western State Hilltoppers. We had Michigan State normal lights. We had the Titans, we had Michigan State Spartans, and we had the Central Michigan Dragons. Now, basketball, we had the Wolverines. That's what we had at the time. Today, we have the Detroit Pistons, and we also had the Detroit Shock, which is the female Detroit basketball league. For hockey, we had what was called the Detroit Cougars, and then later was renamed to the Detroit Falcons, which was renamed in 1926 to what we know today as the Detroit Red Wings. Interesting facts. Motown. If you are not familiar with music, R&B, hip-hop, soul, jazz, all of it, then you're not going to be familiar with this, but I'm pretty sure most people in the world are familiar. Jackson 5, anybody? Motown is still huge today. Still a recording house. Motown, the original recording studio that they have in Detroit, has been turned into a museum decades ago. Everybody here from Detroit knows that, as well as Greenfield Village, the Henry Ford Greenfield Village. Henry Ford Museum is a huge museum, and the village, Greenfield Village, is like a transportation back into time. It's amazing what Henry Ford did, putting that all together. And I still enjoy going there. I know my kids have all been there, but Motown, known for the Supremes, the Temptations, the Miracles, Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, the Jackson 5, Stevie Wonder, Four Tops, Berry Gordy, Diane Ross, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, the Isley Brothers, Tammy Terrell, Boyz II Men, Rick James, Erykah Badu, Neo, Migos, Lionel Richie, Lil Yachty, City Girls, Lil Baby. Oh, here we go. You're going to love this one, because if you're not from Detroit or you're not familiar with this, Aretha Franklin. Yes. I am talking about the one and the only Aretha Franklin. Is from Detroit, Michigan. Now, she was not born here. However, she came here when she was only 2 years old. She was born in a shack in Memphis, Tennessee, and at the age of 2, the family relocated to Detroit, Michigan. Her father was a minister at New Bethel Baptist Church. Diane Ross, Kid Rock, Eminem, Sonny Bono, Joe Louis, Meg White, Jack White, Stevie Wonder, and many, many more are born and from Detroit. Interesting fact, right? So I'm just gonna give you some of this. Harry Houdini died in Detroit on October 31st of 1926. He was 52 years old. That's right, Harry Houdini, the one and only magician who spent a majority of his adult years going around and disproving and exposing fake illusionists, cultists, palm readers, seances as being fake. Now, if you don't know about Harry Houdini was very, very, very close with his mother. And before she died, she gave him a specific phrase that if there is an afterlife, she will come back and she will say that phrase to him. And of course, he lived the rest of his life without ever hearing that phrase. But there's no way of knowing if it was because she crossed over, if you believe in that kind of thing. Maybe her soul was at peace and at ease, and that's why she didn't come back to say that phrase to him. Or some people just don't believe in that. People don't believe that there's anything after death, that the soul, if you were fulfilled during life, that the soul does cross over. However, Harry Houdini made that his mission. So the fact that he passed away after a tour that he had been doing, and if you don't know the story about that, you can look into Harry Houdini yourself and how he actually passed away. He would let people punch him in the stomach. He would tighten up his abdominal muscles and let people punch him. And he would say that he's the strongest man in the world, that he can withtake any kind of punch. And it's been rumored that that was because he already had issues with his appendicitis, with his appendix, and that somebody had punched him at one of his shows here, that person ended up rupturing his appendix. He got appendicitis and died from the infection. However, you can look into that if you want to know more about that. But the best part of all of this is Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was actually raised here in Port Huron, Michigan, in St. Clair County. We're not 45 minutes away from Detroit, the inner city of Detroit, largely still considered part of the Metro Detroit area. However, Henry Ford, that's right, in 1896, he built the quadricycle. It was the first car that he actually drove on the streets of Detroit. And now, there's a huge jump between 1896 and 1926, okay? Because with that came the assembly line. And the assembly line changed everything in car manufacturing and car building. Now, we can continue to 1920. Less than 20% of the United States of American population even had a car, because in 1920, though cars had been produced, the T model had been made, he had already made the quadricycle, which was very much like a buggy with a singular steering wheel. By 1920, things had changed in over that 26 years drastically, but still less than 20% of the US population could even afford a car or even had one. Now, June 16th of 1903, he and 13 others invested $28,000 and started the Ford Motor Company. The first car built and sold was on July 23rd of 1903. Ford passed away on April 7th of 1947 in his home in Dearborn, Michigan, same county as Detroit. He was over 83 years old. In 1920s, average house rental was $55 to $60 monthly, equal to $776 a month today. Streetcars were still widely used. Buses were new. Trolleys were new. Public transportation is not what you think of it as today. You largely walked somewhere. Now, there was the invention of the bicycle, which was a new thing too, but a lot of people couldn't just outright afford one yet. So Chrysler made the 58 sedan, and in 1926, that was $995. Zipper boots were between $3 and $6 a pair. A night dress was an average of 95 cents. A corset was $1.89 to $3.95. A mink coat was $150, which is significant. It was about 35 cents for a dozen of bananas. And did you know that you can actually cruise the Great Lakes on giant cruise ships? Yes, that is correct. You can take a 5, 10, 15 night cruise around Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and I'm going to show you an ad for that later because it's very interesting. All of the things that I found investigating this case. So I'm going to get right into it. So we're not wasting your time and we're going to stream like this. My mother was born Sandra Sue Le Mere. Le Mere was changed from the original French version, which was Le Mieux. And they did that for Americanized English speakers. My grandparents were raised speaking English. However, my great-grandparents on both sides were French, spoke French their entire life. And that's when a lot of migration happened between a lot of the French settlers that were born and raised in Montreal or somewhere else in Quebec, Saint Remy, and ended up migrating to what is today the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The Menominee Indian Reserve, that's up there, and Cedar River, Hermansville, Stevensville, that is where my mom's father's mother and father come from. They actually relocated to Detroit in the later part of 1920. My mother was born Sandra Sue Le Mere. Her father, William Edwin Le Mere, was the youngest of 5 brothers. His mother, Delina Marie La Rocque, later changed to LePage or La Rocque, was actually born in Upper Michigan to her parents, Jenny Adams La Rocque and Frank La Rocque. Now, they had 9 children. They actually had 10. One of them was a stillborn, full-term stillborn. And I have actually found records on that doing this investigation. She was the second child out of the 10. Essentially, 9 of them lived. She was the second child. She was the second oldest. My grandmother, Delina Marie La Rocque, or LePage, La Rocque, they also changed their last name to be, for English-speaking Americans, they changed it to be something that they could pronounce because they couldn't pronounce the La Rocque. So she gets married at 17 years old. We did not know this. My grandfather did not know this. My mother did not know this. And my mom's going to be 73 years old this year. And out of 7 siblings, her and her youngest, my Aunt Donna, are the only 2 that are left. So I'm really glad and proud that I was able to do this because they just lost a sibling not even 2 months ago. And I was able to tell her and give her a lot of this information before she had passed away. Rest in peace to my Aunt Darlene. I'm really proud that I was able to at least give her some of this closure and that she passed with this knowledge and this information. However, my grandfather's mother, she was married at 17, and we did not know that. She was married at 17 to a William Peterson, and he was 22 at the time. They married in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan where they lived, which is right on the Wisconsin border. Now, years later, her parents actually did relocate to Wisconsin, but that area, I mean, it's a whole metro area. I'd have to show you maps for you to understand, but it wasn't uncommon for French people that migrated from Quebec into French logging towns like up there, or people that were working on barges on the Great Lakes. It was not uncommon for them to rent places and move to a different city or different place. Plus, the Catholic Church is very huge up there, and they were all of them in my family, very devout Catholics. So my grandmother is 17. She marries William Peterson, who is 22. She goes on to have, in 1916, 1917, 1918, 1919, she has 3 boys. She has Francis, she has Willard, and then she has a Wilfred. I know that Wilfred passes between... It had to have been between the time he was born in 1918 and 1920, so he was very young. He couldn't have been any older than 3 because after the 1920 consensus, I don't see him anywhere. He's not on there. And in the later part of 1920, Delina is no longer with her husband. She claims that he was legally married to somebody else, and finding all of this out is just extraordinary and mind-boggling to me, but we find out that he was actually married to somebody else. Now, 17 and 22 is subjective to some people. It doesn't seem like that big of an age gap. However, she has 3 children with him, but by 1920, she's on the consensus for Wisconsin as working at a state hospital, and she was a part-time boarder, which I'm assuming was for travel reasons, with public transportation being more limited in 1920 and what it was, that she likely boarded at that hospital. But her sons, Francis and her second son, Willard, were 4 and 3, and they were on the Michigan's 1920 consensus with Jenny Adams, her maiden name, and Frank La Rocque. So it's Frank and Jenny La Rocque. That's their grandparents. They were on the Michigan consensus. So I know that Wilfred passed away. Now I have tried going through records. I've tried obtaining vital records from both Wisconsin and Michigan to see if there's a birth or death record, because that was actually law at that time, that all deaths and births had to be recorded. However, I have not had any luck find anything. All I know is that my grandfather was always told that he had 2 brothers drowned very young. And now knowing what I know, that is very far from the truth and reality of what actually happened. So in 1920, the La Rocque family is living 5 doors down from the Le Mieux family. Pacifique Joseph Le Mieux is my great-great-grandfather, and him and his wife Philomena Le Bombard, who became Philomena Le Mieux, they have 10 children. At 38 years old, giving birth to their 11th child, which was a daughter, she and that child, full term, passed away. So he's very young, and he's got 10 children, 5 boys, 5 girls. His third oldest is my grandfather's father, who is William Le Mieux. Now, he started going by Le Mere. However, he never legally changed it. So the La Rocque family and the Le Mieux family live 5 properties away from each other. My grandmother, Delina, my great-grandmother, Delina, and my great-grandfather, William, all of a sudden are together. At some point, they legally married, and I have not been able to find records on that either. And I don't know if that's because they might have went through an annulment with the Catholic Church or anything else regarding that. But I have looked through vital records for Wisconsin, Michigan, the whole thing, and I have not been able to verify that. But I do know that they got married. So they get married, and in the later part of 1920, they have a 4th son who's named Clifford. That is my great-uncle Clifford Le Mere. However, this is where they changed. With the birth of Clifford is where they changed the name from Le Mieux to Le Mere, because people couldn't pronounce Lemieux. They changed it to Le Mere, from the best of to the mother, or the mother, LA, masculine, feminine. You get my point. So they relocate to Detroit in the later part of 1920, but they also have their 4th child, Clifford. Now, my great-grandfather adopted her 3 children. Now, one of them was already gone at this point. So Francis and Willard, they start using the last name Le Mere. Then they have Clifford. They're in Detroit, and my great-grandfather gets employed with Ford Motor Company. And he stays at Ford Motor Company. He's working at what they call the Rouge plant. And this is really interesting because in late February of 1923 is when the 5th child, my grandfather, William, they called him Junior because he's named after the father, William Le Mere, is born. Now, 1923 to 1926, my grandfather is only 3 years old. His older brother, Clifford, is 5. And then the oldest brother, Francis, is 10. Willard is 9. Now, they already lost the one brother before he turned year 3. He had to have been at least 2-3 when he passed. And we know that happened before 1920. But in 1926, this is where it gets extremely interesting. Because on March 13th of 1926, my great-grandmother allows her son to go around the corner of 4th Street to 3rd Street to where his friend Lawrence Flavin lived. And the Flavin family was very close with the Le Mere family. My great-grandfather was a Knights of Columbus. He also served on the board and was an executive. So was Thomas Flavin's father. So she gives him about 20 cents, and he goes around the corner to his friend Lawrence Flavin. His mother gives him 50 cents. She ends up giving him another 50. So between the two of them, they have about $1.20. They go not even 3.5 blocks down to what is today still standing, the Detroit Cinema. Now, moving pictures were largely in their infancy. They were not very widespread like movie theaters are today. And so this building is actually still there. It's still the original brick building, and you can see that I have pictures that I'm going to put picture in picture to show you so you can see that. They were going to see essentially a movie and get snacks and whatnot. Turns out that they never came back. Never came back. 2 9-year-old boys just disappeared off the face of the planet. And this is where my uncle, my great uncle, my mom's uncle, my great uncle, and his friend become what is dubbed the original Lost Boys. Now, I know you know the story of Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and all of that. They are dubbed the Lost Boys because this was very uncommon for two 9-year-old boys to go missing at the same exact time. Yet that's exactly what happened on March 13th of 1926. Now, this is where my investigation for the past year has taken me down the biggest rabbit hole you or I could ever imagine. And when I mean I'm good at research because I don't stop till I have everything. And not just everything until I feel completely satisfied that I have every piece of the puzzle. I ended up finding articles, but in the past year, I have found over 150 of them, not just in Michigan, but internationally. And this is absolutely the craziest story I've ever heard. And I cannot believe that this is my uncle. I cannot believe that my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom did not know about this. And the reason being, I believe in my own opinion, being Catholic and with what I know now in hindsight, I believe that she was trying to protect her younger children. The oldest son, Francis, who was actually only 11 months apart in age between him and Willard, he was older, so he probably had an inclination of what was actually happening or going on around him. However, my 5-year-old Uncle Clifford and my 3-year-old grandfather probably had no idea. And being that young, I can see why she was being very protective of him. Now, I am going to say very quickly that this is 1926. My grandfather's father, William Le Mieux, actually dies of cardiac arrest coming out of Gate 12 from the Rouge plant at Ford, where he was still working and still employed at. And 1952 was essentially a very hard year because my mother was born that year. My grandparents get married. They've both been previously married. They both previously had a daughter, and they go on to have another subsequent 5 children, including my mom. So my mother is born, but my grandfather's mother, Delina, not only does she lose her husband, she loses her father, Frank Le Rocque, and she also loses her son, Clifford, because he is actually killed in action. He was a first-class sergeant with the Navy. Then he went to the Coast Guard for about a year. Then he went over to Army, where he became a first-class sergeant. And then he was deployed to the Korean War, and he wasn't there very long, and he passed away. So this year was a very, very hard year while they had the blessing of my mom's birth. She lost her husband, her father, and her son. And this wasn't just a significant marking point because she had lost another son in World War II in 1945 in Battle of the Bulge. And that would be her oldest son, Francis Le Mere. And so this is the beginning of what I look at my great-grandmother's life as absolutely enthralled with tragic events that no woman, wife, mother, grandmother could ever imagine having to suffer or endure. But here we are, March 13th of 1926. Scouts searching for missing boys by the Associated Press. This is the Saginaw News, Saginaw, Michigan, page 3, Tuesday, March 16th, 1926. Detroit, March 16th. Armed with radio and newspaper descriptions of 2 9-year-old boys, Lawrence Flavin and William Willard Le Mere. 6,000 Boy Scouts joined Monday in a fruitless search for the wayward youngsters, missing since Saturday afternoon. The boys left home to go to a neighborhood theater, but questioning among their playmates revealed that they may have intended to go to Belle Isle. A thorough search of the island showed no trace that the lads had ever been there, although the police believe firm ice for a considerable radius about the island. This precluded drowning. These are all alphabetized and in chronological order. The Windsor Star, Windsor, Ontario, Canada, page 3, Tuesday, March 16th, 1926, same day. Parents fear for safety of 2 sons have been missing from homes in Detroit since Saturday afternoon, in the hope that Lawrence Flavin and Willard Le Mere, 9-year-old boys, Detroit boys, who have been missing from their homes across the river since Saturday afternoon, might have been in the border cities. Mrs. W.H. Bogus of the Wayne Apartments, 319 Pitt Street West, had asked the Border City Star to help in the search for the missing youngsters, which is being conducted by police, Boy Scouts of Detroit, and neighboring towns. Lawrence Flavin and his parents visited Mrs. Bogus at various times, and when the disappearance of the youths was learned, it was believed that they might have attempted to come to this side of the river or Belle Isle. When they left home Saturday, the boys told their parents that they were going to hike to Belle Isle. A thorough search of the island and ice among the shores failed to divulge any clue to their whereabouts. Mrs. Thomas D. Flavin, 829 Ferry Avenue, West Detroit, mother of one of the missing boys, collapsed yesterday from anxiety. The Le Mere boy lives at 5722 4th Avenue, and as far as known, had never been in the border cities. The two lads less than $1 with them at the time of their parents. We do know now it was $1.20. Detroit police are skeptical over the fear of the parents that the youngsters may have been kidnapped by enemies of their families. Parents lose hope for missing boys. The Battle Creek Moon Journal, Battle Creek, Michigan, page 1, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Detroit, Michigan, March 17th. The parents of Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old Detroit boys, missing from their homes here since Saturday, have been virtually abandoned in hope of finding them alive. The statewide search has been instituted in the belief that the boys may have strayed further than Belle Isle, their supposed destination. Police search for 2 missing boys. Lansing State Journal, Lansing, Michigan. That is the capital of Michigan. Page 8, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Detroit lads start for show Saturday and fail to return home. Railroad police join Wednesday in the search between Detroit and Pontiac police for Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old boy youngsters who Saturday disappeared from their homes, bound for a moving picture show. Reports Tuesday that the boys had been aboard a Grand Trunk freight train at Birmingham by Walter Hathaway. Station agent offered a clue to the direction they might have taken, but no trace was found of them. All agents along the Grand Trunk route were furnished descriptions of the youths following Hathaway's report. 3 persons reported that they had seen boys answering the general description. With but 50 cents in their possession, they show money. It was believed they could not have gotten that far from home. Descriptions of the lads have been broadcast by radio and by newspaper. The aid of suburban police and Boy Scouts in Detroit and the surrounding towns has been enlisted. Now, this is where things get bizarre in this story, because we see this happen all the time with really intense, high-profile cases. And the fact that my uncle is one of the original Lost Boys of Detroit, which was the first Lost Boys case ever cited, people were injecting themselves into this left and right all day long for over 4 months. And the bizarre part is that we think that that's unique to today, and it's not. It is something that has apparently always happened, because it happened 99 years ago. Hi, Pasco. Don't mind my pug. Hi, Pasco. Hi, baby. Oh, it's Amanda. Hi. Oh, he wants to sit underneath me because he likes sitting at my feet. So this is not the first time somebody claims, a whole full grown adult claims to see the boys, match their description, know what happened, tell police or law enforcement, sheriffs, that they see something that completely did not even happen or occur, that they saw them in this city, that country, this country, Canada. This is a repeated theme that I found in these articles, and it's just mind-blowing that is still true today, that people want to willingly insert themselves in very prolific, high-profile cases. So this one here says, think boys 9 lost lives at Belle Isle. I'm going to show you a map of Belle Isle, the Detroit River, which separates Canada from the United States, Detroit from Windsor. There are several islands all the way up. Now, if you don't know, Lake Erie connects through a river system that goes up. This is the Detroit River. It's essentially all one big long waterway. But the Detroit River goes up to Lake St. Clair, which is up by Chesterfield, New Baltimore, Anchor Bay. And then a river continues on, which is the St. Clair River. And that goes all the way up to where I'm at, Lake Huron. Now we have a bridge over to Canada here, the Blue Water Bridge, and we have the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit. We also have a tunnel in Detroit that goes under. We have a tunnel here, the St. Clair Tunnel, but that's only for railway to transport goods and cars under the river between U.S. and Canada. So Belle Isle is one of the many, many, many islands that's in the Detroit River. And everybody knows it. It has a conservatory on it. It has a classic water fountain that has been there forever. They've actually redone it over the years. There used to be a petting zoo. There used to be albino and white deer, a part of a petting farm that you could go to there. There was parks, all of this. Belle Isle, the problem with this is that police wanted to think that they possibly just went to Belle Isle. But where the boys lived on 4th and 3rd Street has been completely demolished today, and that is owned, that's the Wayne State University administration, part of their administration buildings there. And 4th Street, where my great-grandparents and my grandfather grew up, to the end of 3rd Street, which is really, really close to each other. The boys knew each other. They were same age, same grade. Parents were friends, very close. They would have had to walk all the way down and then cross over either Grand River or down Jefferson and go over quite a bit to then get to the bridge, which then crosses over to Belle Isle. And not to mention walking around Belle Isle. Although it looks small on a map, it would have taken 2 9-year-old boys over an hour and a half to 2 hours to do that. And if they left at 3 p.m. on a Saturday on March 13th to just go 3 blocks away, it's very unlikely, with it being still in the middle of winter at that time and ice still being formed on the river, that they would have been too cold to even think about walking that far to get to Belle Isle, or they would have started that walk and they would have turned around and came back home. Because remember, 1926, vehicles and public transportation were not quite what it is today. You largely had to walk. So this article here is the Niles Daily Star in Niles, Michigan, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926, page 1. Think boys 9 lost lives at Belle Isle. The International Global News Service, Detroit, March 17th. Police today were convinced that Lawrence Flavin and Wilfred Le Mere, 9-year-old boys who disappeared Saturday, will not be found alive in Detroit. Due to the publicity that is given in their disappearance, the detectives working on this case believe that the youngsters were near Detroit, someone would recognize them and turn them over to the authorities. We have concluded that young Flavin and Le Mere either left the city, were drowned trying to cross the ice at Belle Isle, said Detective Paul Spaller of the Juvenile Division. It was unlikely that they were kidnapped. Captain John Burkheiser, a detail of the harbor police, who have dragged every hole and the river around Belle Isle, where it seemed the boys might have fallen in, extending their search. Unless her son is found soon, Miss Thomas D. Flavin may die, according to physicians who are attending her. The other mother, Mrs. William Le Mere, my great-grandmother, is also confined to her bed with grief and anxiety. Parents think boys are dead. The Detroit Free Press, page 1, main page. Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Police failed to get clues to whereabouts of Le Mere and Flavin lads. Futile efforts were made yesterday by the Detroit police, the state police, members of the harbor master's crew, and the Detroit Council Boy Scouts of America to locate Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old schoolboys missing from their homes since Saturday. Hope that the 2 boys were taken into custody at Kalamazoo, which is on the other side of the state by 2.5 hours. Late in the day, where the Detroit boys was abandoned by Thomas D. Flavin, 829 West Ferry Avenue, father of Lawrence. Fears his boy is dead. My boy was not one of those picked up in Kalamazoo, said Flavin. Of that I am certain. I have no hope that they will be found alive at this point. The lads were last seen on a streetcar on their way to Belle Isle. William Le Mere, father of Willard, said he believed the boys had broken through the ice and possibly drowned playing. Mothers are prostrated. Both mothers are prostrated and were confined to their beds yesterday. Police of the Canfield Station, who would have been conducting a search since the disappearance, are without a single clue. Provided with a description of the boys to the harbor master and the crew of men patrolling the river from Belle Isle south. It's kind of hard to see. I've actually ran these through a pixel editor so I can see them better. So if I stumble on some of my words, it's because some of them are kind of hard to see. No trace of 2 missing boys. The Windsor Star, Windsor, Ontario, Canada, page 26, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Detroit, March 17th. Futile efforts were made yesterday by Detroit police, the state police, members of the harbor master's crew, and Detroit Council Boy Scouts of America to locate Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 2 9-year-old schoolboys missing from their homes since Saturday. Hope that the 2 boys were taken into custody at Kalamazoo late in the day, where the Detroit boys were abandoned by Thomas D. Flavin, My boy was not one of those boys picked up in Kalamazoo, said Flavin, and it turned out to be true. 6,000 Boy Scouts join in search for 2 lads. Ironwood Daily Globe in Ironwood, Michigan, page 6, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Armed with radio and newspaper descriptions of 2 9-year-old boys, Lawrence Flavin, Wilfred Le Mere, have 6,000 Boy Scouts join Monday in a fruitless search for the wayward youngsters missing since Saturday afternoon. The boys left their home to go to a moving picture theater, but questioning among their playmates revealed that they may have intended to go to Belle Isle. A thorough search of the island showed no trace of the lads, although the police believed firm ice for considerable radius about the island precluded drowning. Some of these articles, if the news is in different cities and they're a part of the Associated Press, sometimes they get the same description, and that's why it says Associated Press. So this one here says abandoned hope of finding 2 missing Detroit boys. Detroit, March 17th. This is the Herald Press, St. Joseph, Michigan, page 8, Wednesday, March 17th, 1926. Abandoned hope of finding 2 missing Detroit boys. Parents of Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old Detroit boys missing from their homes since Saturday, have virtually abandoned all hope of finding them alive. A statewide search has been instituted and believed that the boys may have strayed further than Belle Isle, their supposed destination. Now, this is what really gets me, because Belle Isle was never their destination. Now, the biggest thing that to me here is that they had... Lawrence Flavin had 50 cents on him. Willard had 20 cents. When Willard and Willard goes to Lawrence's house around the corner, Mrs. Flavin gives her son Lawrence an extra 50 cents. So her son had $1. Willard had 20 cents. That was enough for them to see the moving picture and get snacks, apparently. So the thing here is this whole Belle Isle was completely invented. Nobody other than some other neighborhood kids and some acquaintances, playmates, or classmates that knew the boys said that, yeah, all the kids around there knew about going to Belle Isle, that they talk about going to Belle Isle. There was a park there, but on March 13th, that's winter. And of course, walking that far for 2 9-year-olds that are not clothed appropriately, chances are they were not walking that far. So there is no proof at all from the very get that my uncle and his friend ever intended to go to Belle Isle. They intended to go to the movie. That is for sure. That's what they were doing that Saturday. Now this one is the Herald Palladium, Benton Harbor, Michigan, page 5, Thursday, March 18th, 1926. Hunt missing Detroit boys near Jackson. People inserting themselves. 9-year-old boys stray from home. Truck driver gets clue. By Associated Press. Search for Willard Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, two 9-year-old boys missing from their home since Saturday, veered to Jackson, Michigan, and vicinity today after Frank Johnson, a truck driver, told of taking two boys to the city Tuesday. This ends up not being true at all. This guy fabricated this. And he got literally got his face and his picture put in the paper numerous times for this. Johnson's description of the boys' clothing tallied with that worn by the boys' parents by what they said, and when shown a picture of the Flavin boy, Johnson said that for sure was one of the boys he had taken on his truck. The truck driver said he found the boys 3 miles from Jackson and took them into town in Jackson. The boys told him they had come from Battle Creek, but he obtained no further information about them and had not noticed newspaper stories that 2 boys, the lost boys of Detroit, had been missing, he said. The boys left home last Saturday afternoon. Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, and Jackson are further away, going towards the western and on the western side of Michigan, further away from Detroit. That was completely fabricated, now that I know what I know. The Buffalo Courier Express, Buffalo, New York, page 11, Thursday, March 18th. Detroit child missing. Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old of Detroit, disappeared on March 13th. Relatives believe the boy may have come to the city. Detectives Sergeant George W. Patterson, an uncle, lives at number 44 Kennefic Avenue. Now that is actually true. He was a very high up detective in Buffalo, New York. Lawrence Flavin, his uncle, because his mother's maiden name was Patterson. So this is his mother's brother, who is a detective in Buffalo, New York. And of course, he was trying to help do whatever he could to try to find his nephew, thinking that maybe it's possible he tried to carpool here or tried to hitchhike here in some kind of way or another. Now this one is the Windsor Star, Windsor, Ontario, Canada, page 24. Hope revived for finding of youths. Missing Detroit lads seen in Jackson, truck driver says. This is just another repeat of that article, but it goes on to say that 2 boys whom hopped a ride and bummed a meal from a truck driver in Jackson Tuesday afternoon are believed to be in the 2 Detroit lads, Willard Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, who have been missing since Saturday, and it wasn't them. If this guy completely fabricated this story. I am certain this man saw the boy, Willard told Mrs. Flavin Wednesday after she had talked with Frank Johnson, driver of the International Trucking Service, in her home at 829 West Ferry Avenue. She actually let this witness come into her home and spoke to him. And this wasted a lot of resources and a lot of time, because not only did my great-grandfather and the other boy's father take a trip all the way to Jackson, they ended up having to go out there, stay out there, and spent days trying to search for the boys because of one person's fabrication, actually thinking that they were going to find them. Now it says the description of the clothing given by Johnson tallied exactly with what Lawrence and Willard were wearing when left home. Mrs. Flavin said Johnson showed a photograph of the boy. He was positive of his identification. That's the boy who asked me for a ride, he declared. I know this for certain. Johnson said that he met the boys 3 miles from Jackson and took them into town. They said very little to each other, never called each other by any name, never told their names, which is also kind of odd, but seemed in high spirits. They admitted, however, that they were very, very hungry. I took them into the Star restaurant on Michigan Avenue in Jackson and bought them a good meal, Johnson declared. Then I went out to unload my truck. After telling them to wait for me, I returned in an hour, but my helper, Frank Burnett, said that they had left 10 minutes before. That's the last I ever saw or heard of them. Yep. Now this one I had to transcribe. I had to fully transcribe this. So I'm going to be reading this, but I'm going to show you this one. This is where it gets heavy. Now this whole, I'm going to show you. These are all 150 articles that I have found over 4.5 months regarding this. And yes, there are some from Chillicothe, Missouri, Indiana. There's another kidnapped victim that is found in Detroit and his life is saved. There are ones in Canada. There's actually ones that are ran in France. So this one here is the Detroit Free Press, Friday, March 19th of 1926. They've been missing for 6 days. This is page 1. Adventure lures boys away. New theory. Now this actually continues on another page. Now the Detroit Free Press, page 4, Friday, March 19th. The article is continued, as you can see there. Adventure lured boys away. New theory. Belief sustained that the Flavin lads' pennies cannot be found. Further evidence to substantiate the theory that Lawrence Flavin and Wilfred Le Mere, 9-year-old boys who disappeared from their homes last Saturday, left in search of an adventure, is seen by police in the fact that they had been hoarding pennies and that those pennies are now gone. Lawrence said it was learned yesterday that he is a very frugal boy, and how he is laying by treasure for the rainy day was disclosed by his father, Thomas D. Flavin, 829 West Ferry Avenue. Like all boys of Lawrence's age, said Flavin, he was often seized with the desire to sink gallons in the yard, dig for buried treasure, and hoard his gold. He saved his money, and we often noticed him hiding his pennies in various places about the house. When we looked for this money after his disappearance, it was all gone. Of course, it wasn't much. I don't think he had as much as $1 when he left. The other boy had about 20 cents, a small amount, as it looked very big to them, likely. I haven't since the boys failed to return home last Saturday given credence to the stories that they were drowned, or that they were kidnapped or are being held for ransom. If they were held for money, I would have been notified. I feel sure that they were not drowned. I don't like to believe that they were kidnapped by a moron. Men of that type usually do not kidnap 2 boys at one time. I am inclined to take the harbor master's view of the drowning theory, and I do not believe that they met their death under ice near Belle Isle. Of course, there's a chance that that can happen. Now, they dragged the river every day for 16 days. There was also planes internationally and through Selfridge Air Base, the Air Forces that helped for those 16 days, as well as 10,000 Detroit citizens, 6,000 Boy Scouts, and all of the people that are on the Canadian side, the harbor masters, the Coast Guard, the state police, the Detroit police, and the Windsor Provincial Police. All were partaking in that first 16 days, doing everything they can, and no bodies ever came up in the water. So this is why that was nothing more than an assumption. Fathers return home. Flavin and Wilfred Le Mere Sr. returned home last night after a Jackson trip, searching the city for the lads, in pursuance of a clue provided to the Free Press Wednesday. Frank Johnson, a truck driver who told of picking up the 2 boys of their description outside of Jackson Tuesday afternoon. Their search was fruitless. We will have to let it be to the police and the other established agencies, I suppose, Flavin said on his return. The mysterious state policeman who visited Flavin home and various other places in the neighborhood is believed by the Detroit police to be some crook who hopes to extort money from the boys' parents. Yes, a man dressed as a Michigan state police officer with a badge and a number, came to my great-grandparents' home, and to Lawrence Flavin's parents' home, pretending to be an officer, saying that he could get the boys back, taking notes, taking details, and was actually trying to extort over $8,000 from both families. However, there's a problem with this guy, and I'm going to tell you my theory in another video. However, it gets very, very crazy, this roller coaster. The alleged state trooper gave the name of O'Neill. The Flavin family believes he is one of many pranks that could be detectives who are offering assistance in advancing foolish theories. Some of them may have been plausible, but with trace down have never have helped. Wanderlust grips many. Frank H. Cruel, police commissioner, cast a ray of hope to which the anxious parents are now clinging. And that is the boys were seized with wanderlust. During the past 12 months, according to police records, more than 750 boys ranging in age 7 to 16 have been reported missing from their homes in Detroit alone. In most cases, they have been taken into custody by the police of Detroit or to other cities to have been returned voluntarily to their homes after absences of from a few hours to 2 or 3 months. When taken into custody, said the officer of the juvenile department, some of them stand mute and refuse to divulge their names or tell us where they live. They maintain this silence so long as they are well fed and housed, rather than to go back home and face possible parental wrath. An instance of this obstinacy came to our attention a few months ago in one case that parallels that of the Le Mere and Flavin boys. This lad, 10 years old, had run away from his home in Toronto, Ohio, and had been reading Wild West novels and was emulating his heroes. He was returned back home. Of the 750 missing Detroit boys between the ages of 7 and 16 that came up missing between March of 1925 and March of 1926, not a single one of them have ever been found. Now, for the year of 1925 alone, there was over 1,901 Detroit boys and girls between the ages of 7 and 16 that came up missing and never found. And that is just one singular city, not surrounding cities, not surrounding counties, nothing of the sort. Detroit, March 19th, 1926. Believing Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, 9-year-old youths, have been missing since Saturday, are locked in a railroad boxcar. The Detroit police Friday began a systematic search of all railroad yards in the state. The boys left home Saturday afternoon to go to a theater, and though many tips and sightings to the parents and police have resulted in hurried excursions to surrounding towns in search of them, no trace has been secured yet. Adventure spurring them, the police believe the boys attempted to beat their way to unknown parts and have been stranded in a freight car. Also a theory completely fabricated. Boys locked in boxcar. The Lansing State Journal, Lansing, Michigan, page 1. The Buffalo Times, page 21, March 19th, 1926. Search in Buffalo for missing boy. That is Lawrence Flavin. The Battle Creek Enquirer, Battle Creek, Michigan, page 11, Friday, March 19th, 1926. Hunt for 2 boys veers to Jackson. Same article. The Windsor Star, page 33. Border City Star, March 19th, 1926. 2 still missing. Detroit boys left home to seek adventure. Another fabrication. 2 lads sought shelter for the night. Saginaw, Michigan, holds lost boys clue. Saginaw, Michigan, March 19th, believing that 2 boys thought to be 9-year-olds who sought lodging at a farmhouse 3 miles from Saginaw last Saturday night about 10 o'clock may have actually been Lawrence Flavin and Wilfred Le Mere, who have been missing from their homes in Detroit since noon of that day. Police Chief William Kurtz will lead a party of officers in a very thorough search of the district tomorrow. The police say they learned of the fact of 2 boys stopped at 2 different homes and refused a night's bed. They stopped first at Martin L. Willis farm home. Let me transcribe that for you. Hold on. With about $0 rods nearing Saginaw and the other house. The family were away except the hired man for help. He told that the boys that he cannot accommodate them. One boy he saw clearly. He appeared about 9 to 10 years old, and he had a brown coat and cap. It was dark and cold, and the hired man did not keep the door open long. Disappeared up the road. The boys disappeared up the road, which continued about 2 miles, then forks to Bay City, Michigan, with another forking to Reese, and out into Tuscola County and the thumb of Michigan. Yeah, that's right. Up to the thumb of Michigan. If these boys are the ones missing from Detroit, they really could have reached Saginaw on a fast freight or have taken an afternoon Marquette train, as that the railroad runs that way. This continues on in two parts. So the second part actually says, and I've transcribed this, Saginaw holds lost boys clue within 2 miles of the county road of which the boys were together. Disappearance of Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin continued a baffling police mystery. The parents are convinced that they are being held by morons. Thomas D. Flavin, father of Lawrence Flavin, said last night that he did not believe the boys have succumbed to wanderlust or that they have been drowned while playing on the ice of Belle Isle. They knew better than to go to Belle Isle alone. Perfectly normal boy. He described Lawrence as a perfectly normal boy, content with his home life and exceptionally fond of his mother. He went to movies occasionally with his friend, said Mrs. Flavin, but never expressed any wish to leave home. He was past child and told us everything that ever happened to him. Now, when they say that he was past child, they mean that at 9 years old, at that time in 1926, they considered a 9-year-old boy to be older than a child, to be more of a teenager. 9 to me still seems pretty kind of young, but they considered it to be above childhood and going into manhood. So it says that we know that he would not have deliberately ran away. He only had 50 cents and another 50 cents that the mother had given him and Willard to go see a movie together. He would never have gone to Belle Isle without asking his mother's permission first and having somebody with him. The boys disappeared Saturday afternoon. Whether they attended the moving picture show is not known. Mrs. Flavin last saw them crossing Ferry Avenue and going on to 3rd, where they dropped out of sight, which they only had another 2.5 blocks to get to the Detroit Cinema, where the theater was. It is a belief of police that they would have been found before this had they ran away in search of some childish illusion. A study of the psychology of both the lads indicates that they would have not been likely to leave their homes on an adventurous pilgrimage, or that one of them would have dominated the other to the extent of inducing him to go, police say. The theory of drowning has not been abandoned. Sometimes not the belief that they have been held by morons is getting grabbed by these working criminal gangs. The search was at a standstill. Has been, according to police, not been aborted of the puzzle which all class works on. Jim Hawk's Manhunter. There is an exciting new series being of theories winning, as stated by Jim Hawks, to appease the free press, least for the lads' descriptions in Morrow's Maritime section. Now, this is the Grand Rapids Press, Grand Rapids, Michigan, March 20th, 1926. Boys locked in car. The Cincinnati Enquirer, Cincinnati, Ohio, page 4, March 20th, 1926. Believe boys locked in a boxcar. Officers search for missing Detroit boys. The Saginaw News, page 1, March 21st, 1926. The Herald Press, St. Joseph, Michigan, page 8, Saturday, March 20th, 1926. Statewide boxcar search for boys. Officers search for Detroit lads. Basco. The Lansing State Journal, Lansing, Michigan, page 3, Saturday, March 20th, 1926. Lost Boys Trail leads to Saginaw. I already know the gist of that one. Boys traced here are not Detroit runaways. The Saginaw News, page 7, Sunday, March 21st, 1925. Police Chief Kurtz is satisfied that the two boys who last Saturday called at several farmhouses in the vicinity of Indiantown are not residents of Bay City and are not Wilfred Le Mere or Lawrence Flavin, the 9-year-old Detroit missing lads, whom a statewide international search has been in the progress for the past week. Chief Kurtz and Sergeant Boozman yesterday afternoon renewed their investigation in the vicinity and traced the lads to the outskirts of Bay City. From the information they gathered, they were convinced that the boys were from Bay City. So they ended up finding out who these two boys were, and it was not my uncle or his friend. So that person was actually correct in seeing two boys come to the house trying to get a room or food for the night, but they didn't match the descriptions, and it was the wrong boys. So this here, missing boys sought by Saginaw officers. The Battle Creek Enquirer, March 21st, 1926, page 1. And this is police and sheriff's department officers have begun this morning's search along the North Washington Avenue Road leading to Bay City for possible traces of Lawrence Flavin and Wilfred Le Mere, 9-year-old Detroit boys who've disappeared a week ago today. The search was prompted by the report of a woman that said she saw last Saturday evening 2 boys roughly corresponding the description of the Detroit lads. The boys, she said, were headed northward en route that would have led them into Bay City. The Detroit Free Press, Detroit, Michigan, page 1, Sunday, March 21st, 1926. Plane to aid hunt for boys from Selfridge Air Base. This is an article that actually continues. Plane to aid hunt for boys, the Detroit Free Press, page 2, column 2, it continues. And this one I've had to transcribe because you can barely see the original. It's very, look at this. You have any idea? It's taken me a year to transcribe this because you can't even see it. But it's phenomenal that I've even been able to do this. My research has taken me down what I'm telling you, the biggest rabbit hole you can ever imagine. I never even imagined it was this big. Will scour riverbanks photographs to be posted all over the nation and Canada. An airplane from Selfridge Air Base will explore the reaches of the Detroit River from Windmill Point to Bob Lowe in the country adjacent this morning in search for 2 9-year-old Detroit boys, Wilfred Le Mere and Lawrence Flavin, who have been missing since March 13th. 2 aviators will map the plane, which was provided by Captain Vincent B. Dixon, getting commander of Selfridge Air Base, at the solicitation of Sergeant Donald S. Leonard of the Michigan State Police. Yesterday, Sergeant Leonard and Detective Stanley Ferguson were assigned to the case, and Alan D. Strait, State Commissioner of Public Safety, Friday night, to circulate country. Tomorrow morning, circulating, monitoring photographs and detailed descriptions of the 2 lads will be sent to every site in hopes Commissioner Strait can make them nationwide cities, beginning with Lansing. These will be posted in all public buildings. Operating on the theory that the boys may have been drowned in the river, Ontario Provincial Police and the Police of Amherstburg and LaSalle, Ontario, will explore the shores beginning at dawn. This branch of the search will be centralized near Amherstburg, where the rivermen say the water generally gives up its dead, meaning all the people and children that are thrown in the Detroit River because of the way the currents flow on each side and down the center, that it tends to end in that area, which is chilling, horrifying and chilling. Among the score of clues, the boys' whereabout was once received by Sergeant Leonard yesterday, which seemed to be deemed a close scrutiny of the neighborhood of St. John's, Michigan. Bert Gully of that place notified the state police that he had seen 2 lads answering the description of the missing at the railway station there late last Thursday. He said that one of them wore a checkered shirt. The reference to this fact was not contained in the first description sent out, as neither one wore a checkered shirt. Disappearance is a mystery, but insofar as any actual trace of the boys is concerned, the young chums who left their homes a week ago Saturday, ostensibly to attend a movie, vanished from the face of the earth. They did not return home that night. Mystery had swallowed them completely. The first consideration in the case of missing persons, the river, proved unyielding of results after a cursory attention. Then people began to see them here, there, and most anywhere. 2 boys of that age are by no means a rare sight. They have been several thousand pairs of 9 walking around together in Michigan's town and countryside every day since. The boys had long led on their searches, for 5 precious days had elapsed before the descriptions were broadcast and search got underway. They might have hopped rides and bombed halfway to the Pacific coast during the interval. But it does not seem probable that the person in their ages would move about the public gaze for very long without attracting close attention somewhere. Local officials, however, have received not a word of the findings of the boys, of their description by authorities anywhere. Their utter disappearance seems to lend strength to the theories that the boys either were drowned or have met with serious bodily harm at the hands of someone unknown. Boy Scouts search. Radio broadcasting the descriptions of the lads have provided a new impetus to the search. More than 6,000 Boy Scouts have been devoting all of their leisure time to the hunt for the boys for the past week. Police and sheriff's officers of Saginaw began exploration of countryside early yesterday upon receipt of reports that 2 9-year-old boys sought shelter and food last Saturday night at the homes of farmers near Saginaw. However, it was found last night that these boys live in Bay City and had been visiting Saginaw. At the Flavin and Le Mere homes, members of the family cling eagerly to each new clue until the ensuing hours prove it to be as empty as those that they have already heard before. Their hopes alternately ride and fall with the value of each bit of information received. The strain of uncertainty keeps the mothers of the lads of prostration until the adage of no news is good news no longer holds comfort. Sheriff offers $100 reward. Sheriff George A. Walters Saturday announced a personal offer of $100 for the conviction of any person who may have committed a crime in connection to the disappearance of the boys. First, I requested that the Board of County Auditors in Wayne County, Michigan, to post such an award to one of its members was in favor to such a move, but another was against it, the sheriff said. As a result, I am making the offer myself, putting up the $100 that leads to the conviction of a crime leading to the boys' disappearance. And I'm going to end it there. Now, Sheriff George A. Walters and staff, 1923 to 1924. He was this is the Sheriff's Department, Wayne County, Detroit, Michigan. George A. Walters, this man right here, personally put up his own $100 leading to any information that led to a conviction of any crime in the disappearance of my uncle and his friend. But what's interesting about this is you see a lot of Caucasian men, and this led me on a totally different rabbit hole that was equally as interesting, and I hope that I get a reply back. From ombudsman at waynecounty.com. Speaking of Black History Month, I am honored that my family has several inspiring examples of Black people who have lived their lives committed to public service in the face of what some may view as insurmountable odds. Here is a photo of my great uncle Jacob Cleage, who was a Wayne County sheriff's deputy in 1923. Sheriff George A. Walters, shown in the center of the full group photo, was sheriff of Wayne County from 1923 to 1926. Just judging by what I can see in that photo, it appears that there were only 3 other Black sheriff's deputy at that time: William McLean, bottom left, U. Gary, top right, and A. Flenroy. It's not difficult to imagine that this was an especially tough job for a Black man to get at the time, but probably an even tougher job for them to keep. I am amazed that my great uncle was able to achieve this role as a person of color at the time. I have always wondered, he meant, what his reaction would have been to see me become sheriff and eventually county executive. I assume he might have been equally as surprised knowing that. And this is him. So as far as Black history in Detroit, I just want to let you know that 99 years ago, there was four deputies that were serving African American in the Wayne County Sheriff's Department. Interesting fact, right? That's because I wanted to see exactly who this man was that talked to my grandmother. Okay, everybody, with that said, I'm going to stop there because 150 articles is an immense amount of reading to do for one night. So I'm just going to leave it there and tell you all Happy New Year. I love you all. And if you are interested, continue watching for the continuation of this story of what happened to my grandfather's brother and his friend, the original Lost Boys, that came up missing on March 13th of 1926. I love you all. Have a fantastic night. If you want, send me all the love you can. Subscribe, like, comment, share. Stick around. Give me a chance. You might like what I have to say.